I constantly end up feeling quite frustrated, like I think most people do, when we know that there are a handful, I think it is quite literally a handful of these huge conglomerates, these companies that own lots of other little, well, they're not little, lots of other big companies, and they're not making the change because at the end of the day, they just want to be able to pay their shareholders and keep the profit and keep making more and more money year on year. So they're perpetuating so much of this, whether it is overfishing the seas, using plastic bottles rather than aluminium cans, which seems to be like the easiest swap that they're not doing, whatever it might be. Yet the responsibility seems to always lie on the individual. And I know that we do have a responsibility and we have to respect our own little worlds and do what we can. But it feels like they have zero responsibility and seemingly aren't taking much action. And we're left with the sort of the icky guilt and the shame of the things that we know we're doing wrong and the desire to be better but not quite knowing how to action it. That to me just seems so jarring, and like that the change has to come from them too, probably more so than us as individuals, but I might be wrong.
There's lots of things that those kind of companies have actually paid a lot of money to exist, so it's pushed on us. For instance, like recycling was literally something created by the plastics industry to make us think, oh, it's fine, you can use plastic because you can recycle it, which they literally lobbied to make exist. Or things like calculate your carbon footprint and feel terrible about it.
Yes.
You know, it's like, well, carbon footprint is in a way like a horrible negative way to make us be forced to think we should reduce ourself. Because and I think as well, and what I sort of explain a bit about in the book, is we can often think the way we should do things or how we should help is by being smaller, using less, doing without, reducing, which is not language that's fun to hear or do. And I think it's more interesting to look at language that's about, you know, regeneration. Like, how could you support food systems that actually regenerate our soil and actually help the local economy of farmers? Or how can you do things that are actually about getting the most out of your food? And like, oh no, you shouldn't have that, you know, type of thing. Or so I think we can also shift slightly the language around it so that there's some joy in it. And I think also you feel a bit more connected to other people. And I think, you know, and sort of how and why Waste Watch was also something I created was because I just needed to be in community rather than just sat at home thinking like the weight of the world was like on my shoulders.
Yeah, which I think most people sort of wake up with, even if it's on a very subconscious level. Like I sometimes wake up with and it's only been recently because we know that obviously the world's been in a state of flux in all manner of ways and still is. But, you know, the sort of environmental one, you just feel a bit sort of dreadful about it all the time. And that's why I love that your book's very practical as well, because we do need to, where we can, make our own individual changes. And like you say, it hasn't got to be all sort of using the language that makes us feel like, oh, it's so boring. I can't do anything fun anymore that I want to do. It's about looking for these new options, because the systems that we work in, which, you know, are run by governments, but also hugely run by these massive companies, they've made it so easy for us to be as, I don't want to use the word lazy, but as sort of complacent as possible. And like most people at the moment are time poor, they're struggling, they've got shit going on. They don't even have the brain space to go, oh yeah, I can think about this and actually do something about it. But these changes don't have to be these huge overhauls. They are, you know, tiny, and learning about new stuff. Like you might have a refill centre in your town you're not aware of, or you might learn something from your book about upcycling that you'd never, you know, thought about before. What's been your, I guess, you know, your most fun or your favourite swap or new learning that you've implemented into your life?
Yeah, I think as well, it's always good to like, and what I sort of love to, I guess, try and kind of present is that like things that I may love, maybe someone else is like, oh, that sounds, you know, terrible and boring. And so I try and look at this idea of how can you find somewhere that you already enjoy, something in your life you already enjoy doing, and maybe start there, because then you're more likely to commit to it. So it could be cooking, you could love beauty, you could love gardening, technology, like find something within that. Otherwise, you know, it's just not a fun habit to implement. So, you know, for me, I have always loved cooking in the kitchen. It's so kind of practical and hands-on, and I just sort of drift away doing it. So I first looked at single-use plastics in just cooking and how I was buying food, how I was even, and then that led into like food waste and how I could compost the kind of like organic natural stuff and not send it to landfill and instead, compost that. First, I wasn't doing that at home. I was just taking it to like a local community garden. And then I slowly kind of gained the confidence to start having my own home composting system. And, even that could be also your local council maybe pick it up. So yeah, they were my kind of interests. And then like more recently, I've tried to get better at like mending things and sewing and doing things like that. So it's always ebbs and flows of interest. And I think it's always important to say, people often think like, what's the one thing I can do? What's the 5 things I can do? And unfortunately, I don't think it's that simple. I think it's so much more nuanced. There's so much more grey area to it. And I think what's the best thing we can do is ask more questions and look behind the choices, maybe consumer choices we have to make, so we know a bit more about where that came from, or whose livelihoods were affected by making that, or what is the afterlife of this product if I buy it, or do I already have something at home I could, use already and don't need to buy a new one or buy it secondhand, just so we can make more intentional choices. And I think it all literally stems from just a slowing down. I think everything has built in this convenience, this model of convenience of like, oh, quickly just like buy, click, collect, done. It's all very fast. And like you say, I totally get that it's not top priority. There's many other things that people have to worry about in their day. And so I think it is about just taking a couple of things and knowing one week you could be great at it and then the next week it's okay if you don't do those things. Yeah. And if we bully ourselves to feel bad about it, it's kind of counterproductive.
Yeah, it's a very, very sensible way of looking at it, because I think most people do feel burdened and then go, oh, I'll worry about that another year. But actually finding your thing that you're really passionate about. Like, I love cleaning. I am a Virgo. I like things to be a certain way. I can't start work until I've made the kitchen counter really clean and crumb free from all the kids' breakfasts and whatnot. And I found 2 really good companies. One is called Neat with a full stop at the end, and one's called Spruce, I think it is. And they're both just refill cleaning products. They will send you like 1 bottle for life. One of them's aluminium, one of them is plastic, but you're going to have it forever. And you just buy, one of them is like a sachet and one of them is a small glass bottle of liquid. It works out cheaper. They last way longer. They smell amazing. And it's like, oh, I've made a change there. And it wasn't this awful, drastic, having to like have chickens in my garden and my own vegetables growing sort of thing. Like, I'll get there. But this felt like a really good step. And I think it's so important to look at that passion. And there's a term, I've had to write it down because I can't remember the name of it, that you write about in the book, a Japanese term, ikigai.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Ooh. A Japanese term, which is sort of looking at your set of values and when you wake up in the morning, what that meaning and that reason is. How has that helped you commit to making changes in this way of life, sort of thinking in that way?